Darkness blanketed the settlement. Everything seemed so peaceful. Until thundering hoofbeats shattered the night. Then came the screams. Gunfire cracked, wild and desperate, but useless. Children wailed. Houses erupted in flames, the fire swallowing the sky, turning the night blood red. The men fought back, but they were no match for the battle-hardened Apache warriors. By dawn, it was over. The entire village, gone. The men lay dead. The women, bound, dragged through the dirt, their fate sealed. Their nightmare had only just begun. Author S.C. Gwynne in Empire of the Summer Moon captured the sheer brutality of these raids. Their attacks were not just military tactics, but psychological warfare. Villages were razed, women and children killed or abducted, every trace of life wiped out. The Apache, like many warrior cultures, did not take prisoners lightly. To them, captives were more than just prisoners, They were power, bargaining tools, slaves, instruments of vengeance. And for the women, their fate was the cruelest of all. The forced march began. Women were dragged across the unforgiving desert, their hands bound so tightly that blood dripped from their wrists. Their bodies ached, their throats burned from thirst. But no one dared to cry. No one dared to speak. They knew what happened to those who resisted. The sun beat down without mercy. The scorching sand blistered their bare feet. The heat was unrelenting. Those who stumbled, those who collapsed, were left behind, or worse, cut down where they lay. Mercy did not exist. The survivors trudged forward, step by agonizing step, their minds clinging to the faintest hope, that they might see another sunrise, that they might somehow survive this waking nightmare. Spanish explorer Francisco Vázquez de Coronado once described the fate of Apache captives. They dragged them along in agony, without water, without food. The dead were left behind, like footprints of destruction. One of the most haunting stories is that of Olive Oatman. In 1851, at just 14 years old, Olive and her family were ambushed while traveling to California. Her parents and siblings were butchered before her eyes. She and her sister were taken, prisoners of a world they could never have imagined. Her captivity lasted years. She was sold to the Mojave. She was branded, blue tattooed lines permanently etched across her chin, a mark of ownership that she would carry for life. When she was finally freed in 1856, Olive was not the same girl who had been taken. She had survived. But she had also lost everything. For many, there was no freedom. Some, like Herman Lehmann, were absorbed into Apache life. Taken at just 11 years old, he adapted to their ways, their customs, their laws of survival. But later, in his memoirs, he confessed. He had seen women captives endure horrors beyond words. Forced labor, savage beatings, complete subjugation. And for many, the nightmare never ended. History remembers many women who suffered under Apache captivity, enduring unthinkable hardship. Lozin, a fierce Chiricahua Apache warrior and strategist, stood side by side with her brother Victorio. She was not just a fighter. She was a leader, a spiritual guide, and a relentless force against both Mexican and U.S. forces. But Lozin's influence did not end on the battlefield. Historical accounts suggest she may have overseen the fate of prisoners, especially women. Some captives were forced into servitude, others stripped of their identity, assimilated into Apache life, whether they wanted to or not. Lozin was feared, she was respected, and for those held captive under her watch, she was the deciding force between survival or something far worse. Her reputation as a warrior and a spiritual leader cemented her place in Apache history. But her name is also tied to the dark fate of prisoners whose lives were forever changed or completely erased. For many, there was no return. The ones who did carried scars that never faded, not just on their bodies, but in their very souls. Women were herded into Apache camps, examined like livestock. They were no longer human. They were spoils of war. Those deemed valuable were forced into marriage with Apache warriors. But this was not marriage in any traditional sense. It was erasure, stripping away everything they once were. Historian James Haley, who studied Apache culture, wrote, "Women captured by the Apache were often forced into marriage, but not as we understand it. It was a form of forced assimilation, where they became property, stripped of any choice. Many women never accepted their captors. Some fought back, some made desperate attempts to flee, only to be recaptured and severely punished. Others, with no alternative, adapted to Apache life. But the memories, the past, was never truly erased." In Apache culture, scalping was not merely an act of violence. It was a symbol of dominance, a strategic weapon of psychological warfare. A scalp, bloodied and torn from the head of a fallen enemy, was displayed like a trophy of conquest, proof of a warrior's skill and a warning to all who saw it. Anthropologist Keith Basso once wrote, "Scalping was not just about killing an enemy, but instilling terror. When a person was scalped, it was a warning. No one was safe." The mere threat of this fate sent waves of fear through enemy communities, ensuring submission without a battle. Historian James A. Sandos, in his research on Native American warfare, pointed out, "The practice of scalping among the Apache was as much about psychological domination as it was about war. It sent a clear message. Defiance meant not just death, but mutilation and eternal disgrace." Scalping was also a ritual of victory. Warriors would return to their villages parading scalps through their camps, a proof of triumph, a sign of power. While scalping was not exclusive to the Apache, their mastery of it as a tactical deterrent set them apart. Settlers, soldiers, rival tribes alike, all feared the gruesome display, because trespassing into Apache lands could mean more than death. It could mean eternal humiliation. For those fortunate enough to escape Apache captivity, the road to recovery was long and painful. Their return to the world they once knew was not a homecoming. It was a struggle. Many captives, especially women, had been forever changed by their experiences. Figures like Olive Oatman, who was tattooed and lived among the Mojave for years, struggled with reintegration, facing suspicion and alienation from their own people. She had survived, but she would never truly belong again. Others, like Felix Ward, a boy taken by the Apache and later known as Mickey Free, chose to stay. The Apache had reshaped his identity, and for him, there was no going back. Yet despite the trauma, some captives developed conflicting emotions toward their captors. They had lived among them. They had seen firsthand the cultural values, traditions, and hardships that forged the Apache into formidable warriors, survivalists. Historian Eve Ball, who spent years interviewing former captives, noted that some, even after gaining freedom, spoke of moments of kindness amid the brutality. This duality, this unsettling mix of fear, respect, and resentment made reintegration even more difficult. But in the end, the suffering endured by these captives remains a harsh testament to the cruelty of war and the subjugation of the vulnerable. Their stories reveal how power and violence have dictated history, forcing individuals to navigate the blurred lines between captivity, survival, and identity. And in remembering them, we acknowledge not just the horrors of the past, but the resilience of the human spirit. This story is not just about the Apache, not just about the settlers. It is a story about the brutal nature of humanity, a reminder that violence, power, and survival have shaped history more than morality ever has. When power is everything, who protects the weak? When hatred reigns, is there room for mercy? Some say the Apache were savages, ruthless in their raids. Others argue they were warriors, fighting for survival in a world that sought to erase them. But in the end, does it even matter? The cycle of violence, captivity, and conquest repeated itself, time and time again. The strong took from the weak. The victors rewrote history. And those caught in the middle, they suffered. So what does that say about us? About the world we've built? What do you think? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, let us know in the comments. Your voice matters.